right to a redress of their grievances if they had been injured by a medical provider or a health care facility because of practice below the standard of care.
Yield the gentleman another 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for one additional minute.
And I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Iowa knows, in fact, that that is absolutely not true. What we do in this Health Act is limit the awards for so-called pain and suffering at $250,000. And, Mr. Chairman, indeed, a number of states, after California enacted this law 35 years ago, Texas, Florida, my own state of Georgia, have enacted caps higher than that. And no doubt other states will do so in the future, because this bill specifically says, and it's called the flex caps, that if a state wants to enact a limit on non-economic of $1 million and have it applicable to multiple defendants, they can do that. They have the right to do that. And in regard to the injury to a patient, there are no caps whatsoever. There are still suits that are awarded to injured patients that are in the millions of dollars. So the gentleman from Iowa was totally disingenuous in what he was trying to explain. Very smooth-talking, very convincing lawyer. That's what we expect. But we want to end frivolous lawsuits that those who are truly injured get their day in court. And that's what this bill does. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
Chairman, I yield myself 1 minute. I
thank recognized for 1 minute.
Gentleman who is a physician for his comments. He said he wants to save Medicare. He said the Republicans want to save Medicare. They want to save Medicare, but their budget proposal would end Medicare. Let's just understand, those who are on Medicare know they can go to the doctor or the hospital or other health care provider, and Medicare will pay. Under the Republican proposal, they'd be given a voucher and told to go buy a private insurance policy as much as they could afford by adding additional money. To save it, they want to end it. And we hear the statement, so-called pain and suffering. The people who are living their lives with constant pain and suffering from a medical malpractice problem, it's not so-called to them. It's a real terrible situation that they have to live with. And I think that because one of our speakers happens to be a trial lawyer, I want to point out that the past speaker is a medical physician, as if that should make a difference. Let's base our arguments on the points that are made. I, at this point, want to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Vermont, an important member who we hope will come back to our committee in the very near future, Mr. Welch.
I thank the gentleman. In Vermont, we faced the challenge that we face in this nation. We want to have access to health care, and we want it to be affordable. When we had legislation, the Democrats were pushing access. The Republican governor was concerned about cost. We sat down and realized we're both right. If Democrats want to achieve the goal of access to health care for everybody, we have to control cost. Our Republican governor was right. We worked to do that. This Congress has failed to do that. Health care costs are rising beyond our ability to pay, whether it's the taxpayer, whether it's the business that's paying the premiums, whether it's an individual with self-pay. You cannot have health care costs rising at 6.5% a year, as they have for the past 10 years, higher than the rate of inflation, profits, or the economic growth. It can't be sustained. IPAB is a tool to help us control health care costs. We have to do that for our taxpayers, for our employers, and for our citizens. It's advisory. These 15 people who have experience in economics and in medicine will look at data, will look at information. What's there to fear in them doing that? And they'll make recommendations to Congress. Congress will retain the right to have the final say as to whether these recommendations will work or not, or we want to substitute something else. That makes sense. The alternative is what has been put forward to essentially shift the burden of rising health care costs onto seniors and citizens by turning Medicare into a voucher. It would cap what the taxpayer would pay by exempting this Congress from making reforms in how we deliver care that could result in cost coming down, and simply say to seniors on Medicare that if cost goes up 6.5% a year, another 6.5%, you know what, folks? You are on your own. Figure out how to pay for it. Congress is AWOL on this. So, to the extent that we claim we want access, but we won't control cost and take steps that are required to make health care spending sustainable, we're shirking our responsibility. IPAB is not the answer, but it's a good tool. And to reject it and instead replace it with a voucher system where the full burden of runaway health care costs are simply imposed on seniors is the wrong way to go in a continuation of Congress ducking its responsibility for the reforms in the health care system that our citizens need and deserve. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased at this time to yield 3 minutes to one of our leaders, distinguished gentleman from Texas, Mr. Henserling, Conference Chairman.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, regrettably, the President's policies have failed and continue to harm our economy. We were told if we would pass the stimulus plan, unemployment would never exceed 8%, and instead it's exceeded 8% for 37 straight months. We were told that the President would cut the deficit in half, and instead we have the worst debt in our nation's history. We were told he would take steps to reduce the price of oil, and instead gas prices have doubled at the pump. And one more of his policies that has failed is clearly his health care plan. We were told that it would create jobs, but instead every day I hear from job creators in the 5th District of Texas who write me things like, quote, Obamacare will put a tremendous burden on my company. I can't put a 5-year plan in place. I therefore have to withhold cash for expansion. I also hear things like, quote, I could start 2 companies and hire multiple people, but based on this administration and the lack of facts with Obamacare, I will continue to sit and wait. We know now that the Congressional Budget Office says that the health care plan will cost us almost 1 million jobs from this economy. We were also told that if we pass this, that health care would be more affordable and lower premiums. But instead, the Congressional Budget Office now tells us that the new benefit mandates will force premiums to rise in the individual market by $2,100 per family. Any way you look at it, the President's health care law is harming job growth, it's harming our economy, but perhaps even more ominously, its infamous Independent Payment Advisory Board, Section 3403 of the Act, that will harm our seniors. The IPAB is going to be comprised of 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats handpicked by the President. Their sole job is going to be to ration health care to our seniors and impose federal price controls. This will undoubtedly slash senior access to doctors and to other providers. They literally will be making decisions about the health of our loved ones, our parents, and our grandparents. The Center for Medicare and Medicare Savings Actuary has confirmed that, quote, large reductions in Medicare payment rates to physicians would likely have serious implications for beneficiary access to care, utilization, intensity, and quality of services. Mr. Chairman, when it comes to my parents, both of whom are on Medicare, no government acronym, no government bureaucrat, no government board can ever substitute for the good judgment of their chosen family doctor. And that's why today I'm proud to stand with my colleagues here to vote to repeal the IPAB. And once again, we need to repeal the President's health care plan and do it today. I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased at this time to yield 4 minutes to the distinguished Democratic whip, Mr. Hoyer from the state of Maryland.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 4 minutes.
I want to speak about this bill, but I also want to respond to the chairman of the Republican conference, who apparently fails to realize that we've created 4 million jobs, 3.96 to be exact, over the last 24 months. We've had 10 quarters of growth in America, as opposed to losing 786,000 jobs the last month of President Bush's term. We added 257,000 last month in the private sector. So to say that the President's program is not working is simply inaccurate. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a wolf in sheep's clothing. They don't like the health care bill. That's what the chairman of the conference just said. He wants to vote to repeal that. We understand that. And they want to pick it apart, piece by piece. Let me talk about it. 2 years ago, we passed a comprehensive health care reform package that is already lowering costs, expanding access, and contributing to deficit reduction. The Affordable Care Act was a significant moment when Congress once again took bold action to constrain the growth in health care spending and make insurance more accessible and affordable for all Americans. In the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, we ought to make sure that people can get insurance and have affordable, accessible health care. Insurance companies can no longer deny coverage to children with pre-existing conditions. I bet they think that's a benefit. A protection that will be extended to all Americans by 2014. I've had a lot of people talk to me about that provision. They like it. Insurance companies can no longer drop Americans from their policies when they get sick or impose arbitrary and unfair caps on coverage. You buy insurance to make sure when you get sick you have coverage. And if you get very sick, you need more coverage. It says you can't cancel because you're really sick. I think Americans like that. Since the Affordable Care Act was signed into law, over 32 million seniors on Medicare have accessed free preventive services. The Medicare Part D donut hole is on the path to close completely by 2020. And seniors who fall into this coverage gap are right now getting a 50% discount on their brand drugs. They like that. 360,000 small businesses have already taken advantage of tax credits that are helping them provide more affordable coverage to over 2 million workers. Lifetime limits on over 105 million Americans with private insurance have been eliminated. Over 2,800 employers have already received financial assistance that helps them provide affordable insurance to 13 million retirees who are not yet eligible for Medicare. And CBO continues to project that the Affordable Care Act will reduce the deficits by tens of billions of dollars by the end of this decade. Despite all these benefits, today Republicans will take yet another vote to repeal part of the Affordable Care Act. But what they want to do is repeal the act. That's what the chairman said of the conference. I take him at his word. I appreciate his honesty. Today their focus is on the Independent Payment Advisory Board, or IPAB, which couldn't be less timely issue. IPAB is a backstop mechanism to ensure that the Affordable Care Act's savings and cost containment provisions will be achieved. But CBO has already said they don't expect it to be triggered at all over the next decade. That's because the Affordable Care Act's cost containment provisions are already having a significant impact on slowing the growth of health care and Medicare spending. This proves that the Medicare spending can be constrained without turning Medicare into a voucher program, as the chairman has said. That forces seniors to spend more and ends the Medicare guarantee. Americans don't want that. The Republican plan does exactly that and tries to mask the end of Medicare as we know it by talking about choices and competition.
Give the gentleman an additional minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 additional minute.
But both competition and choice already exist in the Medicare program. 99.7% of beneficiaries have access to at least one Medicare Advantage plan, and in the majority of counties they have an average of 26 private plans to choose from. And in spite of all these choices, about 75% of all seniors still choose to remain in traditional Medicare. The Republican budget released just yesterday paints a clear picture of their priorities, showing once again they stand for ending the Medicare guarantee, shifting ever-increasing costs onto our seniors, and repealing all of the Affordable Care Act's patient protections. I stand behind the cost containment provisions, the delivery system reforms, the improvement to Medicare, and the new benefits and protections that were enacted under health reform. And I stand with my fellow Democrats and America's seniors in support of preserving the Medicare guarantee and ensuring Medicare remains available and affordable for generations to come. And I appreciate the ranking member's leadership on this issue and all of those who were critically responsible in ensuring that Americans had access to affordable, quality health care. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 years ago, they said PPACA would cost less than $1 trillion. CBO now says, new estimate, it's going to cost over $1.7 trillion. Stay tuned. I now yield 2 minutes to the author of the IPAB repeal, gentleman from Tennessee, Dr. Poe, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Tennessee is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the chairman for yielding, and I thank the chairman. I guess if the Affordable Care Act is so popular with the American people, that's why 60% want it overturned. I'll start by saying that. That's the latest that I've seen. Let me just go over briefly what the IPAB is and why I'm so vehemently opposed to it. As a over 30-year practicing physician, I've looked at this and I've seen 2 examples already of why I know and what I know is going to happen here. We have the model in the SGR, the sustainable growth rate, where we pay Medicare physicians today. As has been stated multiple times, we have a board with 15 appointed people to it, over half of whom cannot be health care providers or cannot be health care related folks that are going to make decisions based on a formula for Medicare spending. We're going to set limits. If you exceed those limits, then cuts will come to providers. We've done that with SGR, and guess what the Congress has had the ability to do during that time? To override those cuts, because everybody in here, both Republicans and Democrats, understand if we cut our providers, we're going to decrease access for those patients. So what's happened with SGR? Just 2 weeks ago, we passed an SGR temporary fix to the end of this year to avoid a 27% cut in physician payments. Guess what would happen with IPAB? A 27% cut, Mr. Chairman, to Medicare providers, and in 5 years, also the hospitals are included. And I can tell you our rural hospitals where I live will not survive those cuts. And those cuts will occur with minimal overlook from this U.S. Congress and no judicial review. And let me read this right here. IPAB is the single biggest yielding of power to an independent entity since the creation of the Federal Reserve. And this is not me. This is Peter Orszag, the former budget director for President Obama. So my concern as a practicing physician is if we cut physician payments so far that our patients will not have access to us. And right now, Mr. Chairman, in the primary care group I'm in, that access is already being limited, and we see it around the country. I yield back the balance of my time.
The time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
I yield. He wasn't quite finished. Another minute to
The gentleman
Dr.
from
Rowe.
Tennessee is recognized for additional minute.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. And one final thing, as an obstetrician, I started practice in 1977, delivered almost 5,000 babies, paid $4,000 a year for malpractice coverage. When I left, the young physician replaced me $74,000 a year. The patients got no more value. 1975, when I got back home from the Army, every single malpractice carrier had left the state of Tennessee. All 10,000 or so, almost all 10,000 physicians in Tennessee get their insurance from a mutual company. Since 1975, over half the premium dollars that every doctor has paid in the state of Tennessee has gone to attorneys, not to the injured party. Less than 40 cents of every dollar has gone to the people who've actually been injured. We have a terrible system of paying people who have been injured, compensating them. And this will allow us to do that and will allow us to get some certainty so that those costs don't keep rising beyond anybody's ability to pay. And what's happened in a lot of places, Mr. Chairman, is access to OB doctors and high-risk doctors have been limited because of the liability. I strongly support H.R. 5 and encourage my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, nobody is going to deny that there's a problem of medical malpractice. The issue is whether the state of Tennessee can adopt a law to solve its own problem, the way the state of California has done, the way the other states have acted. Let the states operate on in this area, which has been a traditionally reserved for them. Washington does not have all the answers. Imposing one system on the whole country is not the way to go. I'd like to, at this point, yield to the gentleman from the state of Washington, Mr. McDermott, for 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Washington is recognized for 3 minutes. Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, you might ask why we're having this debate. Well, the Republicans have never wanted to solve the Americans' problem with health care access and cost. And the Congress passed, with the President's help, a bill that gave access to many millions of people and put in place some mechanisms to control cost. Now, they've tried to repeal it, the Republicans, again and again, Mr. Speaker, and they know that next Wednesday it's going to be in the Supreme Court. So today is press release time. And they have a formula for press releases in this House. The members are going home to their districts, so they select a straw man, and they put him up here. The straw man in this case is the IPAB. And then they scare seniors. They say, this IPAB is going to take away your health care. And all the seniors are supposed to crawl under the chair or under the bed because the Republicans are out scaring people again. They do it by telling half-truths. This commission will make recommendations that the Congress can adopt, change, or if they don't want to do it, they can let them go into place. Now, they have 3 choices, and the Congress can do either to change them or adopt them, and we are not giving away our power. That is a half-truth to say that we are. Secondly, as you heard from the minority leader, or the whip, it's 10 years before this happens. So, folks, if you're sitting at home watching this, I mean, Mr. Speaker, they're probably all scared they've quit eating their dinner because they're worried about what's going to happen. We're talking about something that's going to happen in 10 years. This is simply a scare tactic, and it is directly related to the attempt to derail the President's reelection. If they can take down this health care bill, they will have him. They will have shown he hasn't done anything. But the fact is, he got it through here, and it's going to be implemented in 2013. Now, you can spend all the time you want passing bills in here that are absolutely kabuki theater, because this bill is going to go over to the Senate. You all know it has to pass both houses, the Senate and the House. The Senate put this in. Does anybody think that the United States Senate is going to take away seniors' rights to health care? I mean, does anyone think that? I mean, you're accusing the United States Senate of putting this in the bill, setting it up to take away health care benefits from seniors. That's nonsense. If you think the Senate is going to walk away from this provision, well, more kabuki theater. We'll be back on another day. Thank you.
Recognized for 1 additional minute.
Yes, I yield to you.
We want to hold down costs in health care for Medicare itself. Yes. Costs of health care going up for all health care coverage. But Medicare, if it goes up too much, it's a real problem. So we try to, in the Affordable Care Act, put in place ways to hold down costs by reorganizing the delivery of care. We have some other strategies. We hope it will work. But for a backstop, if it doesn't work, there's this independent payment advisory board, and they will give us some ideas of how to hold down health care costs. Now, it seems to me the biggest objection is once they give their recommendations, we could accept them, we could change them, or we could let them go into effect. I think the biggest problem is that if nothing happens, those health care costs go up. And that's what preserves the right of Congress, is to let nothing happen. And this is not how to hold down costs. This is to let the costs go up. I thank the gentleman for yielding.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I yield 3 minutes to another doctor, Dr. Harris, from the state of Maryland.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think the gentleman from California just said what this is all about. The IPAB is about cutting expenditures for our seniors on Medicare when they need their health care. The IPAB is no straw man. It's a health care policy bureaucrat's dream and a Medicare patient's nightmare. It's 15 bureaucrats, and the gentleman from California called it right. Insurance company representatives, pharmacy company representatives, benefit managers, employers, all those people who really have the care of an individual patient in mind. In fact, that rationing board limits the number of health care professionals who can serve to a minority. A minority of people, and then goes further and says, and oh, by the way, they have to actually stop practicing health care for the 6 years they sit on the board. How close are they going to be to knowing what's going on in the care of a patient? Now, the gentleman from Iowa talked about the myth of defensive medicine. I want to ask anyone, Mr. Chairman, who cares, go on a labor and delivery suite and look at what's happened to obstetric care to our women in America over the past 40 years because we don't have effective tort reform. I'm an obstetric anesthesiologist. I spent 30 years on a labor and delivery suite. In 1970, the cesarean section rate in this country was 5%. 1 in 20 women going to a hospital to have a baby would have a cesarean section. Last year, it was 33%. Now, I'll tell you, not much has changed about childbirth in that time. But now 1 in 3 women, a woman going into the hospital to have a baby, 1 in 3 chance they're going to have a cesarean section. Not only that, 40 years ago, those of you who want to ask people you know who delivered 40 years ago, most obstetrics was delivered by a 1 or 2 person group where a woman got to know her obstetrician who was going to deliver her baby. Go ask the folks in your district now what happens. You go to a group, there are 10 or 12 people because they can't afford the malpractice insurance. They have to go in a big group so someone else can pay it. It's impersonal service. Go and try to find an obstetrician who's in their 50s or 60s and practicing obstetrics. They've given it up long ago because they can't afford the premiums. The most experienced obstetricians are no longer delivering care to American women. The C-section rate is 1 in 3. And a woman can't even expect to see her obstetrician every time she goes for those prenatal visits because there are 8 or 10 in the group and they all have to get a chance to see that patient. That's what the lack of tort reform has done to the delivery of care to women in this country. We need to pass this bill and pass it now. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, may I inquire how much time each side has remaining in the general debate?
The gentleman from California has 17.5 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from Pennsylvania has 29 3/4 minutes remaining.
I'll reserve my time.
The gentleman from California reserves his time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I yield to another doctor, gentleman from Indiana, Dr. Bouchon, for 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of repealing the Independent Payment Advisory Board, or the so-called IPAB, and I urge President Obama and our colleagues in the U.S. Senate to join us, the House Republicans, in saving access to quality care for America's seniors. I've been a practicing physician for over 15 years, and I don't think I've seen anything potentially more detrimental to seniors' health care than the Independent Payment Advisory Board created under the Affordable Care Act. As has been already said, a group of 15 unelected Washington, D.C. bureaucrats appointed by the President making decisions on the funding of Medicare with little oversight from your elected officials. This is not a partisan issue. Whether it's this President, the next President, or a President 20 years from now, no one should have the power to create a board with this much control over health care. Doctors provide critical care to our nation's seniors, but they also run a business. They have to receive proper reimbursement to keep their doors open, or they will lose their ability to provide care for America's seniors. The Affordable Care Act has already cut over $500 billion from the Medicare program, and then the President doubled down by proposing over $300 billion more in his budget. Medicare cannot sustain further cuts if we're to keep access for America's seniors. Without any chance of judicial or congressional oversight, IPAB will become one of the most powerful agencies within our government. I ask the American people what part of the government operates in this way. When the people in Washington, D.C. make decisions you don't agree with, you can vote them out of office. But when IPAB makes a decision, the American people most likely will have no recourse. If the President and the U.S. Senate really are concerned about saving Medicare, which they claim to be, I urge them to get serious and work with us, because according to CBO, Medicare may be insolvent as soon as 2016. We need to reform Medicare in order to strengthen and preserve it for future generations, and true reform is not continuing to cut funding of the program. Again, I urge the President and the Senate to join us in eliminating IPAB. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. Gentleman from California.
Continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I yield 2 minutes to another doctor, gentleman from Michigan, Dr. Benishek.
Gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the chairman for yielding. Mr. Chairman, as my good friend the chairman knows, before I came to this House, I served as a general surgeon for 3 decades. So 2 years ago this week, while President Obama was pitching his 2,000-page health care overhaul, I was back home in Michigan taking care of patients and wondering how this law was going to change the relationship between a physician and his patients. Now the President's broken promises have shown us, instead of providing real solutions to strengthen the doctor-patient relationship or improving the way we deliver health care to patients, the President gave us the Independent Payment Advisory Board. IPAB is a 15-member commission of unelected bureaucrats charged with cutting Medicare spending, specifically reimbursement for physicians. It's a very Washington-type solution. Take something as personal as the doctor seeing his patient in an office and create a panel of Washington bureaucrats to determine how that's going to be paid for. As a physician, I can tell you that when you set up an unelected board, give them unprecedented power and little government oversight, the results will be clear. This will lead to arbitrary cuts to the Medicare program, less access to care, and rationing. Today, we are voting to stop that from happening. Mr. Chairman, we've already heard the other side of the aisle accusing the majority of pushing grandma off a cliff. But instead of scare tactics and hyperbole, I ask members of both sides of the aisle to support this effort to repeal IPAB, support this legislation that eliminates what seniors are really concerned about, a group of unelected bureaucrats making health care decisions for them. As a physician, I'm proud to support the repeal of this ill-conceived rationing board. on behalf of all my patients and constituents in northern Michigan. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California continues to reserve. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I yield 2 minutes to another health care professional, a nurse, gentlelady from North Carolina, Renee Elmers.
Gentlelady from North Carolina is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman for this opportunity to speak with my colleagues as a nurse and the wife of a general surgeon. Mr. Speaker, IPAB was created under Obamacare to slash Medicare spending by restricting health care services from seniors in need. Repealing IPAB will restore the doctor-patient relationship. Mr. Speaker, when someone goes to the doctor, they reveal the most personal experiences of their lives and engage in a relationship with the dedicated healthcare professionals who put his or her career on the line for the purpose of making that individual whole again. Left alone, President Obama's government knows best mentality will force our seniors to cede this relationship to a board of unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats who will have the power over their health and the lives of millions of other Americans. Each patient is unique, and their care rests on the doctor's ability to provide the best treatments available, regardless of the cost of their liability. One of the greatest challenges facing our nation's health care system, including Medicare, is the rapidly rising costs. This legislation recognizes that. This legislation repairs and repeals the IPAB with common sense medical liability reforms that will save billions of dollars. I have sat and listened to the debate today, and I have listened intently over the 2 years since Obamacare went into effect. And I still have one question to my Democrat colleagues across the aisle. What is your solution for Medicare? We know it is not sustainable as it is now. What is your solution? Mr. Speaker, federal bureaucrats should not dictate to doctors how to provide care, force them to prescribe medications regardless of their known complications. I'd like to ask for 30 more seconds.
Yield another 30 seconds.
Gentlelady is recognized for additional 30 seconds.
Thank you. And make them liable with no limits or protections. We have got to move forward on malpractice reform. We should not place, our colleagues ask the question, how can malpractice be put in place at the federal level? And yet they have put federal health care as an issue and put control as an issue. We must provide patients and medical professionals with the security and the safety net. And I yield back. Thank you.
The time of the gentlelady has expired. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, our idea for Medicare for the future is to make it better, not to eliminate it. And in the Affordable Care Act, we provided help for seniors to pay for their prescription drugs, especially when they're in the donut hole. We provide money so that they will be sure to have preventive services without having to pay for it, so that we know we can prevent diseases that we'll otherwise have to pay to treat. We have extended the life of the Medicare Trust Fund. We're always looking for ways to hold down costs in a reasonable, rational way. One of the reasons we have very high costs in Medicare is that when a doctor and a patient get together, the doctor decides how many services, especially when that doctor gets paid more money for more services. And therefore, we've got to look for alternatives to that. Now, I have a feeling that a lot of doctors like the idea of deciding how many services are going to be paid for, but we just can't afford that. So we have ways to hold down health care costs by trying to bring people together in affordable care organizations, ways for doctors to manage the care from physician to physician in a more efficient way. and we have a backup if these other things don't work, to have an advisory committee to give us ideas. But their ideas cannot lead to rationing health care or making people have to pay more money for their insurance or to restrict benefits or modify eligibility. That's what we propose to do. The Republicans propose to take away the assured guarantee of services under Medicare and require people to go find a private insurance plan if they can afford it, over and above the voucher, which would never keep pace with the increase in health care costs. I'm at this time going to yield 2 minutes to my California colleague, Mr. Thompson, to speak on our side of the issue.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I rise today in opposition to this legislation. Whether or not you're a fan of the IPAB, I strongly urge you to oppose the bill. This bill is not about IPAB. This bill is nothing more than a political maneuver to attack the Affordable Care Act on the 2-year anniversary of its enactment. I challenge anyone to talk to one of the over 7,000 young adults in my district who now have health care insurance coverage and ask them if the Affordable Care Act should be repealed. Or maybe the 6,000 seniors in my district who have saved over $3 million in the cost of prescription drugs. Or the 30,000 children and 120,000 adults who now have health care insurance that actually covers preventive services without burdensome co-payments. Or the thousands of children with pre-existing health conditions who will no longer be denied coverage by health insurers or told they've hit their lifetime cap for services because of a disease with which they were born. Ask them if they'd like to repeal the Affordable Health Care Act. No one has ever suggested that this bill was the perfect solution to health care, but we should be working together to fix it, not trying to repeal it for cheap political points. And to add the medical malpractice provision that they added in this bill, that is so wrong-headed that the doctors in California have come out in opposition to this bill. And any doctor will tell you there's work that needs to be done in regard to medical malpractice. But the way this was done has even brought the doctors to the table in opposition. So on behalf of the millions of Americans who are already benefiting from the Affordable Care Act, I ask you to join with me and with the California doctors in opposition to this legislation that does no one any good at all. I yield back the balance of my time.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, I find it interesting the gentleman who just spoke signed a letter to former Speaker Pelosi on December 17, 2009 that says the IPAB provisions, quote, severely limit congressional oversight of the Medicare program and eliminate the transparency of congressional hearings and debate. Moreover, the creation of a Medicare board would effectively eliminate state and community input in the Medicare program, removing the ability to develop and implement policies expressly applicable to different patient populations.
Would the gentleman yield?
IPAB, or an equivalent commission, they said, could not only threaten the ability of Medicare beneficiaries, but of all Americans to access the care they need.
Would the gentleman yield?
I will yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Mexico, Mr. Pierce.
Thank you.
The gentleman from New Mexico is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this legislation, H.R. 5. One of the most trusted sources of information in my mom's life, she's in her 80s, is her physician. Now, we just got a history lesson, a civics lesson from our friends across the aisle just a moment ago, expressing how the Democrat Congress passed, the Senate passed, Democrat Senate, and a Democrat president signed into law a bill that puts into place ways to control the cost. They took $500 billion from Medicare in order to pay for the bill that they passed. Then we were given a political reality, in addition to the civics lesson, that the Senate is not going to take the bill up. Therefore, we should not be discussing it. I think for the peace of mind for people like my mom, who are going to have the IPAB this independent board inserted between them and their doctor. Mom won't even get to talk to her doctor if this board decides she can't. The scheduler will simply say you have to come back next month or next year. And we're told we shouldn't bring that up because it might scare seniors. Seniors have a right to be scared. They have a right to wonder. If some board that does not even answer to Congress, it can change laws without coming to us, it can write their own rules, and we're to be told that we should not be discussing this issue because it might frighten seniors. It just might, and they very well should be. President Obama's health care legislation did not bring one new doctor into service, but it brought millions of new patients in. The real truth is that we have increasing demand for doctor services because of these new patients and no new supply. You're going to have to limit somewhere. They wanted to hide this limitation under the IPAB. We're simply saying, let's restore the relationship between 86-year-old moms and the doctors. Let's get rid of the IPAB. This bill would do it, and I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, if you listen to the comments that were just made on the House floor, it would be better to leave over 30 million people without health insurance because they'll want to see doctors when they get sick. Well, the legislation, the Affordable Care Act, provides more training for doctors and a higher reimbursement for primary care doctors. And it provides for the opportunity to get a medical education with a payback in underserved areas. We're going to get more doctors, but we shouldn't say that those who have health insurance should turn their back, as the Republicans, I feel, are doing, to all those who have no insurance whatsoever. I want to yield at this point 5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from the state of Virginia, Mr. Scott, so he could further speak on this legislation.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition of H.R. 5. There are several troublesome provisions with the bill. For example, it sets an arbitrary and discriminatory $250,000 cap on non-economic damages. It reduces the amount of time an injured patient has to file a lawsuit. And it also repeals IPAB, the board created by the Affordable Care Act to control Medicare costs while preserving access to care. Although there are many troublesome provisions with the bill, I'd like to speak at length about one provision, the so-called fair share provision. The fair share provision would repeal the general rule of joint and several liability. Joint and several liability is a common law principle that enables an injured patient to seek compensation from any or all of the parties responsible for the patient's injuries. Joint and several liability provides that each of the guilty defendants are jointly responsible and individually responsible for the total damages, and if they want, they can agree in advance on how to apportion fault among themselves, and thus they can purchase and share the costs of insurance and charge their fees for services based on that agreement. The general rule of joint and several liability does not burden the injured patient with the requirement of assigning proportional fault. This PATH Act creates a bizarre and impossible standard for the patient by eliminating joint and several liability. It requires that the plaintiff, who is the patient, demonstrate each negligent party's proportional responsibility. This is often impossible for the plaintiff because frequently all the patient knows is he woke up as the victim of malpractice. Why should he then be required to find out what each and everybody did, and how does he do that when everybody is denying any liability? But unfortunately, this bill essentially requires the plaintiff to conduct a separate case against each defendant, each case requiring a finding of duty of care, breach of that duty, proximate cause, finding of damages, and then a determination of what part of the damages are attributable to what malpractice. Each of those cases requires an expensive expert witness, depositions, and the full expense of complicated litigation. It also complicates any settlement that might take place because a patient can't take a chance of settling with one defendant without knowing what ultimately the other defendants might have to pay. What's most disturbing about this bill is that it eliminates joint and several liability for all kinds of damages, including economic damages. In doing so, H.R. 5 is more extreme than most states' laws. Economic laws compensates injured parties for their out-of-pocket expenses, such as the hospital bills and doctor bills and lost wages. And even though the proponents of H.R. 5 claim to use California's Medical Injury Compensation Reform Act as a model, not even California eliminates joint and several liability for economic damages. Mr. Speaker, over centuries, each state has balanced judicial procedures between defendants and plaintiffs. Some provide a longer and some shorter statutes of limitations. Some have large, some have small, and some have no caps at all on damages. Some deny recovery in cases of contributory negligence. Others allow recovery based on comparative negligence. Most have joint and several liability. A few do not. But the interests of plaintiffs and defendants have been balanced over the years in each state. We should not override centuries of state-level balancing of these interests by preempting some parts of tort law with this federal bill. And, Mr. Speaker, we usually hear that tort reform is necessary to address three problems: defensive medicine, high malpractice premiums, and frivolous lawsuit. This bill will not do anything to deal with defensive medicine because the lawsuits are not eliminated. They'll still be defensive medicine. And because it increases expenses for defendants, it may actually increase total malpractice premiums. And finally, the bill does not target frivolous lawsuits. The Institute of Medicine estimates that approximately 100,000, up to 100,000 patients die every year due to medical mistakes, and yet there are only about 15,000 medical malpractice payments each year. So there's a question of whether or not frivolous lawsuits is even a problem. But to the extent that it is a problem, this bill will not target frivolous lawsuits. It will increase the cost of litigation and may reduce all lawsuits, but it will not target frivolous lawsuits. So, Mr. Chairman, I would hope that we will not pass a federal law to abolish joint and several liability at the state level. I would urge my colleagues to oppose this legislation.
It's expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Chairman, at this time I yield 2 minutes. Gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Hulker.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of this bill. The unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats of the Independent Payment Advisory Board pose a threat to the ability of seniors in my district and around this country to get the health care they need. Across my district, I hear from doctors who are deeply concerned about their ability to accept more Medicare recipients because reimbursement rates are already too low. But if the IPAB bureaucrats are allowed to ration care, rates will be driven even lower. Fewer doctors will be able to afford to treat Medicare patients. It's cruel to tell our seniors that they have Medicare, but refuse to tell them that there will be no doctors who will be able to treat them. IPAB will be the end of Medicare as we know it, the end of seniors able to get treatment from their preferred doctors. That's why we must act now to repeal IPAB, to protect seniors and to protect Medicare. I hope my colleagues on both sides of the aisle will join me in supporting this bill. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from California reserves. The gentleman from Pennsylvania.
May I ask the gentleman how many speakers he has left?
We have one.
One. All right. I'll yield to myself at this time, then, such times I may consume.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for as much time as he may consume.
Mr. Chairman, H.R. 5, the Preserving Access to Health Care Act, PATH Act, not only fixes our broken medical liability system, it also repeals the Independent Payment Advisory Board, one of the most ominous provisions in the President's sweeping overhaul of health care. Medical liability reform will preserve access to quality health care in states like Pennsylvania by allowing doctors in high-risk specialties, such as obstetrics and neurosurgery, to practice without the fear of frivolous lawsuits. And according to the Congressional Budget Office, reduce the federal deficit by $48.6 billion over the next 10 years. According to the President's health care law, the purpose of IPAB is to reduce Medicare's per capita growth rate. The board is made up, as we've heard, of 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats who will be paid $165,300 a year to serve 6-year terms on the board. If Medicare growth goes over an arbitrary target, the board is required to submit a proposal to Congress that would reduce Medicare's growth rate. These recommendations will automatically go into effect unless Congress passes legislation that would achieve the same amount of savings. In order to do so, Congress must meet an almost impossible deadline and clear an almost insurmountable legislative hurdle. The board has the power to make binding decisions about Medicare policy, and with no requirement for public comment prior to issuing their recommendations. And individuals and providers will have no recourse against the board because its decisions cannot be appealed or reviewed. In other words, the board will make major health care legislation essentially outside the usual legislative process. The board is also limited to how it can achieve the required savings. Therefore, IPAB's recommendations will be restricted to cutting provider reimbursements. In many cases, Medicare already reimburses below the cost of providing services, and we're already seeing doctors refusing to take new Medicare patients or Medicare patients at all because they cannot afford to absorb the losses. Any additional provider cuts will lead to fewer Medicare providers, and that means that beneficiary access will suffer. Seniors will be forced to wait in longer and longer lines to be seen by ever-shrinking pool of providers, or have to travel longer and longer distances to find a provider willing to see them. Clearly, Medicare growth is on an out-of-control trajectory that endangers the solvency and continued existence of the program. IPAB, however, is not the solution. I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 5. With that, I'll yield back.
Does the gentleman yield back?
I'll reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased at this time to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Rush Holt.
The gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Holt, is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my friend from California, and I rise in opposition to H.R. 5, which would repeal the Independent Payment Advisory Board, which I think is one of the good features of the health reform law. I have real concerns about H.R. 5. We're talking about undoing work instead of doing the work that this Congress should do. Repealing IPAB in the pretext of protecting Medicare just one day after the Republican budget was released that would end Medicare and shift the cost of health care to our seniors while giving tax breaks to millionaires. There's just no logic to this. The bill would also make significant changes to the federal health care liability system, making it difficult for legitimately injured patients to hold health care providers accountable, including even limiting the ability of victims of sexual abuse from getting justice from the institutions and providers who had harmed them. The health reform law, which the Republicans want to repeal, included malpractice reform, like grant programs for states. And while I support improvements to the medical malpractice process, it's important to note that malpractice is not the primary, not even really a significant reason for the escalating health care costs. States that have passed stringent limits on medical malpractice claims, like the ones in H.R. 5, have, in fact, some of the most expensive health care in the country. This bill is irresponsible. It's unnecessary. Where's the transportation bill? Where are the jobs bills? Why are we on the floor talking about undoing good work instead of doing the work that this Congress should be doing? This bill's irresponsible and unnecessary. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this political theater. And I yield back to
Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield an additional minute to the gentleman and ask him to yield to me.
I'd be pleased to yield to my...
Gentleman is recognized for an additional minute.
I thank you for yielding to me.
Yield my friend from California.
The problem that we keep facing is rapidly rising health care costs. It's not just for Medicare. It's for private insurance. It's for anybody who has health coverage. The costs of health care are going up rapidly. And the approach of Medicare has always been to look for ways to hold down the costs. There was a time when ophthalmologists would charge a fee for removing the cataract and then ask for another fee for inserting the lens. Well, that made sense when that surgery was brand new, but they didn't want to give up the two fees that they were receiving because it would be a reduction in their reimbursement. But Medicare said, no, that really doesn't make sense. Medicare does a lot of things to hold down costs, and then in private insurance picks them up because so often they make sense. The way, another 30 seconds.
And I will yield that.
The way to hold down
30 seconds.
The way to hold down costs is to try to reform the way health care is delivered. And Medicare tries to do that. If we don't do it that way, the Republicans would say that private insurance will be able to control it because that's all people are going to be able to get. No more Medicare. They'll have to buy private insurance and let the insurance company tell the doctor and the patient what they'll be able to do and with their trying to hold down costs without regard to the Medicare patient. Thank the gentleman for yielding to me.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Pennsylvania. Mr. Chairman, we're prepared to close. So, have you?
We will yield back the balance.